Well, my name is Philip Hartley Smith, and I've lived in this area now, in Fox Chapel and the Pittsburgh environs for some 30-odd years, the longest I've ever lived in one place. But I was born and raised in Sydney, Australia, and completed my undergraduate education there and end of World War II, and graduated in mining, engineering. And then I wasn't interested in going to England really for graduate work, but I chose MIT because I wanted to get further into metallurgical science and on the refinement of metals. So I came to MIT, and I think it was 3 very, very wonderful years. I mean, I found it was a privilege to be there in one of the finest engineering institutions or scientific institutions in the world. I think that one of the things that struck me was the decency of the people in New England. I came to like the New Englanders very much, and I came to respect the American way of tertiary education teaching. And I'll give you one example. When I was being registered, the head of the department was registering me. And at MIT, everything is by courses. Course 1 was civil engineering because that's what it started as, and then course 2 is mechanical, and course 3 is mining and metallurgy, and so on up to now. They're up to about course 28. But so the head of the department said, to Dr. Chipman, he said, "What do you want for electives?" And I said, "What's an elective?" And he got this kind of shocked look on his face. He thought I was probably smarting him a bit. And I said, "Sir, I'm sorry, I don't understand what an elective is." In the 5 years I was in engineering school in Sydney, every course was prescribed for me. I mean, I had to take what the faculty said I had to take. Well, he said, "We do things differently here." I was about to say, "Too bloody right you do things differently. This is pretty good." Now, what do I get to pick? Well, he said, "You take your catalog and go through, and you can pick out 1 or 2 courses." And so I took some more geology in course 12, and I took some courses in the Sloan School. But educationally, that was one of the rich periods of my life. And after that, I went into the steel industry in Indiana Harbor, and then into a copper weld, and which was a company that made alloy steels and tubing and transmission cable for high power lines you see stretched out between towers. And then I became president of it and CEO when I was 40, and I was out of there when I was 51, but it was 11 very, very good years. Well, there were a couple of things about it. It turned out that there had been some question on some. At that time, we had a fairly large European shareholding, and that shareholding had been involved in some questionable pricing of uranium. And I was on that board of the European company, and we had a disagreement as how the best thing to do was to work it out. And I felt that if you're going to be domiciled in a country, you obey the laws of that country, not try to change it. So it was a very amicable parting of the ways. And then I decided I was not going to go back into another corporate thing. I said the longest I'll stay with the company is 3 years. And so I got in. I always enjoyed turnaround management, trying to analyze what's gone wrong. To me, as you go through life managing a business, you have to pause every once in a while and say, where have we come from? And realistically, where are we now? And then turn 180 degrees and say, where do we want to go? And then you have to say, how do we get there? What do we need in men, materials, money, markets? How do we get there? And then you have to milestone those points. Otherwise, you could just kid yourself. and you have to say, I will get this done by such and such a date. So that was the discipline I entered into my company, and then some of these turnaround situations. It works pretty well. Sometimes the question is, how do you sort of get the horse going if the doesn't recognize it's got a milestone coming and it hasn't done what it should have done? So it was a lot of fun. No, I'm not a birthright Quaker. I knew of Quakers because my mother's family came from around Hobart, and I knew that there were Quakers there. When I met Martha and married her, I knew there were Quakers in the Chicago area. I used to attend the meeting house there. There was always something about Quakerism that attracted me. And I think I could see it more clearly years later when I had the joy of meeting a Professor Walvin, who came to Earlham to give some lectures. He wrote a very, very interesting book, Quakers, Money and Morals. I felt that the Quakers stood for something that was right, and I liked their way of and admired their way of reasoning through a problem and not forcing a difficult issue through with 51% versus a 49%. I felt that of the reasoning through, and with a sense of a sense of love between parties. It was not a situation of we won, you lost, or I lost, and you won, or whatever it is. I think that, like some religions in the country today, or in the world today, I think they've lost their way a little bit, but I still have a very deep respect for what they do. Well, I tend to think of it more perhaps in the sense of this particular meeting here in Pittsburgh, which is, I would almost say, this would be judgmental, and I would apologize for that if that is. It's somewhat agnostic. I mean, I think if there was anything that, as I read, James Walvin or some of the other great historians have written on the continuum of Quakerism in England and how it evolved and grew, there was a sense of it was Christ-centered. I find it puzzling if you talk to someone in your meeting who's a professor or something like that, and he's saying, oh, we're way beyond Christianity, we're in universalism now, or something like that. And I say, gee, I must have fell off of the bus at the last curve. I mean, I think that when I read the New Testament, and which always I find a most amazing document, I don't see, Jesus saying, gee, we're way past all of this now, I'm a universalist. Yes, it was 1991. It was very interesting, as a matter of fact. I was at that point treasurer of the First Presbyterian Church of Pittsburgh, and I'd been on the Board of Trustees. We had a very large endowment, and we had a very large gifting that came in every year on from a trust. When I say large, I would say when you're thinking of something in the order of $300,000 a year, that's large. And there was, and each year we had to report to the court what was being done with this endowment flow that had been going since the late 1930s. And meant a lot to the church, because not only was a resident church, but it was also a great outreach church. Right in downtown, right on 6th Avenue. So I'm treasurer. I have a fiduciary responsibility both of the church and the trust and the assets in the endowment. And there had been some improper use of the funds. The president of the then president of the Board of Trustees and the session felt that we should sort of, just drop it and move on. And I had a difficult time pointing out to them that we had to satisfy a permanent assistant attorney general of the Commonwealth, who has a responsibility for widows and orphans and the trusts and so on. And they weren't about to sign off on it at all. So they felt that the people in the session and the pastor felt that they were going to try to, get some sort of a cut a deal type of thing. And if I were to not agree to that, then my name would be stricken off the rolls. I said, that's okay. I mean, it'd be tough, but we'll see. And so I resigned. I had known several people who were involved at the meeting house here in the late 1989, 90, 91. And so I started going to the early meeting, and we would sit around after 9 or 10. We used to go over to a diner on Bound Boulevard and sort of rehash some of the thoughts that had come up in the meeting hour. And so I got involved in that, and then I think there was a feeling that the meeting at that time was in a little financial stress. It also had a little bit of a problem. There was some major maintenance that had to be done, so I helped on getting that work done, and tuck pointing chimneys and things like that. And then we found that our exits were not up to code, and so it was a pretty expensive problem on putting it all. But we got it all put together, and it's a beautiful old meeting house down there, and it sits on 1.5 blocks, so it's a very desirable piece of real estate. But I think that the meeting had a difficult time facing that if you have a property and the building and the land is one thing to maintain, but if you've got $1 million building, you better figure you're going to be spending 3 to 5% of that each year to keep it maintained. I had a very, very difficult time in getting that message through. I think, though, that it's drifting away from being Christ-focused was probably led to my not being quite as interested as I was. Well, you never heard the word Christ. I mean, it was
in the meeting house. You mean?
In the meeting house, or any discussions, or if you raised an issue, and when you asked the question, Christ, what would he want us to do? That was sort of put down as a sort of bit of a joke. Well, that was from 1968, and then I left Copperweld at the end of 1977, and then and really left the payroll in the middle of 78. And I sort of took a 6-month sabbatical. And then at the end of 1978, I helped this Belgian company turn around. They had 3 large plants here, which were in the red. And being Belgian, they were very interested in getting them into the black. So somehow or other they had heard, probably mistakenly, that Smith knew something about how to get companies into the black. And oh yes, we got it done within about a year.
So they were smarter than you gave them credit for.
I never doubted their smartness. I mean, listen, a Belgian businessman could negotiate with an Arab rug merchant, and he would come out ahead. They're very, very smart. Well, I think it's a very fair question and a very accurate one. Am I or could I be authoritarian at times? Yes, I think the answer to that would be definitely yes. I think the thing I've always sort of striven to do is to, when one is, facing a difficult challenge of some sort, to think it through and think through all the ramifications of the decision to be made. You can't relive your yesterdays. You can't pre-live your tomorrows. You've got to deal with something today. And I think that sometimes people put off making decisions, saying, "Oh, it'll get better if, let's wait it, let it age a bit." And my view is this. I mean, you never see, I've never found that you can see a problem totally clearly. To me, it's almost like a mosaic. You look at a mosaic tile deck and you look at it and say, what are they trying to tell me through that? It's not totally complete. Well, I don't think I have time to wait around and see it all complete. You have to say, I think that's going to be, something or other, a fleur de lis or something or other. I suppose part of that is generic in me. My father was known in the Southwest Pacific as Massa Hurry Up. And when I was in New Guinea in 1942, I would say within a month that some of the natives in Port Moresby knew that this guy was, this fellow, was Master Hurry Up's son. Is it a problem at times? Yes, I think I do go off half-cocked sometimes. But I also think that I've seen some companies fail to recognize the markers they should have seen and acted by, and end up behind the eight ball, and then you just lose the game. There's a time rate of change that must be faced up to if you're facing a problem. I've always felt you have to be on the head of that curve. You have to say, what is the problem? What can we do about it? Do we have the resources to do something about it? And what are the resources? Do we have enough? Not, well, let's think about this and, take another look at it next month when we see another month's results come in. And the next thing you know, you're holding your backside and baying to the moon. And I'm getting too old for that. I think that there are parts of that whole process of discerning and understanding that can be very good. I think that you don't want to go off half-cocked. If you go off half-cocked, you may end up shooting yourself in the foot, and then you're going to limp for a while. I would prefer not to see it that way. I guess what I've been trying to say is that my feeling is I felt that in decision-making, I'd like to have everyone's views get out on the table and talk about them. The thing that I feel very strongly about, and it's something that sort of guides me in my investments, I didn't want a board of directors that were yes men. I felt or if I've served on boards of the Presbyterian Ministers Fund, for example, a trustee. Well, who was the trustor? There are two parts of that, a trustor and a trustee. The trustor was up there in heaven somewhere, and they were giving me their trust so that I would act in the right fiduciary way for them in what that particular enterprise was to do. I felt the same way as a corporate board. The shareholders were trusting me. Was I a major shareholder? No, I had a pretty substantial holding of my net worth was in company. But I think that's an issue, was that I felt that at times Quakers spent too much time sitting around, centering down and thinking about things and so on and so forth, and seeking consensus. Sometime along the way, you have to say, okay, I've heard it. We could wait around, but I think we've got to get going. Otherwise, there is a time value of options. At point A, you may have 3 options. If you're going to be dilatory about it, when you get to point B, you may have 2. I worked for a boss like that one time. He would put it off and put it off. We would have 4 options, and then 3, then 2, and then you come to the one, and he'd make the decision. And he'd say, see, Philip, you see, it was best by waiting we were able to do. And I have to say, sir, we missed a couple that if we'd been able to implement them at that time, we would have been in much better shape we are today. Well, that wasn't the best thing to say to the boss because he and his family owned the company. But when I chose to leave him, he was very concerned. I think he was sorry to lose me. Well, I think that perhaps Quakerism, I think that perhaps there are some other faiths. I think that people like Pax Christi within the Roman Catholic Church is trying to raise the issue of, is it the right thing to be doing with this militarism that we have going on around the world? I think there are other faiths that perhaps that are raising those questions. I think that we're groping as a people in a way as to what is the right thing to do. There's a couple of, could you hand me that on the top of there somewhere on top of that Bible? Just give me a moment.
Sure. You let me know when you're ready and I'll start the case. Yeah, there you go. That's better.
We'll just get a couple of these. This is the Pax Christi group that I mentioned to you. It's a little daily reading book. And here's one from General Omar Bradley. Now, he was Eisenhower's right-hand man, another five-star general. And here's Bradley saying, "We have grasped the mystery of the atom, and we have rejected the Sermon on the Mount." Pretty powerful statement in a way when you think here's a five-star man who went through West Point, got up there, and had actually seen blood and gore in battle. No, he didn't have a PhD from Duke University or something like that, but he was a man who'd seen it. And I come to another statement here, which I have a deep respect for. "No, it is not God's will that a few rich people enjoy the goods of this world and exploit the poor. No, it is not God's will that some people remain poor and abject forever. No, religion is not the opiate of the people. It is a force that exalts the lowly and casts down the proud, that feeds the hungry and sends the sated away empty." A letter to the peoples of the Third World signed by 18 Catholic bishops. Now, the reason I read this daily is to just remind myself this is the wisdom that someone is trying to share with us. And I ask myself, is it the right thing? Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in a final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world is in arms, and this world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This is not a way of life at all, in any true sense. Under the cloud of threatening war, it is humanity hanging on a cross of iron. Dwight David Eisenhower. Well, you say, what's wrong with that? I mean, here was a man, President of the United States for 8 years, led the armies in World War II. These were men that had put their, Bradley, Eisenhower, they'd put their, as they say, they put their butt on the line. Do we listen to them? No, we don't. I mean, how can you look at people in the face? And I don't know how some of these stars and whatnot, but, fold a flag and take it over and give it to a widow in Arlington can really look at them and say he died for a good cause. Well, I'm not an expert in the field of religion, so let's make that clear. I guess I've read enough of history to think that one of the things that undercuts Christ's work that we're called upon to do as we walk this path To me, one of the most beautiful sounds must be when someone crosses over and you hear a voice saying to you, "Well done, good and faithful servant." When you see divisions coming up, the Lutheran Church splits, and we have the Episcopal Church splitting, we've had the Presbyterian Church splitting. Within our Quaker faith, we've got sort of the Eastern Seaboard Quakers, we've got the Middle Quakers, with them we have another group out in the West. And when one divides, you've been conquered. Let me see if I can phrase it. What we should do might be coming, and this is Philip Noah Hartley Smith's, Massa Hurry-Up's son, speaking. The two words or the two speakings of our Savior in the Bible that sort of get me thinking about how to straighten up and fly right were saying that if you mislead a child, you better have a millstone tied around your neck and jump overboard. The second is when Christ gave that wonderful illustration of rewarding one group and another, and he says to the one group, "Good on you, you've done right well." Well, what did we do? He said, "When you saw me naked, you clothed me. When you saw me hungry, you fed me. When I was homeless, you took me in." Those are a couple that I would say would be practical applications. Martha is the one who's a pretty devout Presbyterian, and I go with her down to a little church down 5 miles down the hill down here at Etna. I look at those people. They're overweight. Usually that is a sign of tension from not eating the right foods. I look at their teeth. I almost say I want to drag them to a dentist to get their teeth fixed. I happened to do some research on this one time and found a little Presbyterian church in downtown Dallas, the First Presbyterian Church of Dallas. In fact, I was invited there as a guest one night with a group of people on a foundation board. And talk about humbling. I mean, here are these pompous, arrogant business people coming along. Oh, this must be Vaughn coming in. And we're there, and we thought that the First Presbyterian Church of Dallas, this is a big deal. And we went in, and it was late-ish, and we were in our suits, and the people serving us were the session and the board of trustees and their wives. And we went down to the basement, and the meal was set out on paper tablecloths and so on. We had the same meal that they'd fed to the homeless an hour earlier. When we were shown around, they had 3 dental chairs, and the dentist within that community took turns coming, and a couple of nights a week to come in and take care of their teeth. And I'm saying, gee, that's interesting. And one of the men very gently said, if you fix their teeth, they will eat properly. Light goes on. And then I looked around. They had mailboxes, post-op. If you're homeless, how do you get mail? Then I'm looking around further. They had a laundry, and each man had a locker. They could change their clothes. They could take a shower, get what. So when they were finished, they could have handled their mail. They'd been fed. If Eddie had to see a doctor and whatnot, or see a dentist, it was done. And then they were taken off to a sleeping shelter for the night. When we came back, I talked to the folks at, there's a place over here that was started by a Shadyside Presbyterian Church called East Liberty Family Healthcare Center. And it's run by a really decent bloke by the name of David Hall. And he's a MIT techie. I always say he went wrong. When he graduated from MIT, he went to medical school, of all things. And I said, look, that's like going to mechanical engineering and becoming an auto mechanic, David. Come on, do something better than that. He calmed down Hartley. So Martha and I got into it. There's a very poor area here in Pittsburgh. It's just right across the river below that Veterans Hospital on the far side of the river called Lincoln. So I went over there and talked to them. They had a building, and I talked with David Hall, and he said he would help us with how to plan it. So Martha and I installed a dental chair and all the stuff, the appurtenance you need to get. I said, I'll get you set up, but you're going to have to run it. I mean, I'm not going to be subsidizing it year by year by year. I'll stand by you for 3 years, and then you can get the thing going. And we did. I'm trying to do the same thing down here in Etna. Now, I can't cure homeless. I must say the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. I mean, to think that people, that they can't go and get enough food, I can't think of a more humiliating thing for someone to have to do is to a father not being able to see that his wife and his kids aren't getting squares 321. It's wrong. It's wrong. Can I do anything more? Yes, I'm going to put in another clinic down here somewhere on this side of the river where we can do something. I look around those people down there, and I feel like saying, look, I'm going to call my friend, the dentist over in Oakmont, and get you an appointment and so on and so forth. I can't. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is we'll get a clinic set up there, and we'll get someone to take care of it. Yeah, I think I have to pick out what Martha and I can do. The other thing that Martha works on is the Mars Home for Youth. It's a Presbyterian thing where a dear lady left a big chunk of property up in Butler County for troubled youth that would be under wards the court and that type of thing, where they can be educated and brought into a sheltered community and get turned around. There's a lot of hurt in this world today, but I don't see a lot of people doing very much about the hurt in this part of the United States. As I read history, these fracturing of religions and then bringing them back together are issues that they're a cycle. They often come during times of plenty. And usually it's hard times that bring people back together. My personal view is that this country will not come out of its hard times for probably 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I don't think we've seen the end of the hard times yet. I think that if you read history, and I say the great similarity, when I was courting my wife, good Hoosier girl, I was quietly told, don't talk about being a Democrat in the family area, or don't talk about FDR being a great man. Well, I happen to think he was. And you think of the things that were done there. I mean, if we don't do and read history carefully and implement it, we're just going to repeat it. But when you think of the things that were done in similar economic times, when people of all faiths came together to do something, to me, the great shocker was this. I had an immense respect for Herbert Hoover as a mining engineer, as an entrepreneur and whatnot. As a president, he wasn't worth the powder to blow him to hell. Why? I don't know. But his view was, I mean, that the Andrew Mellons of this world, we've got to sweat this out a little bit. Well, it's okay with his net worth, Andrew Mellon or Herbert W. Hoover, to sweat it out. But as a Quaker, I think he should have done a little bit more hard thinking. And Hoover and Mellon fought the New Deal and what it was trying to do. we'll make missteps along the way, as were made. But you know, the dams that were built, the public works projects that were done, and people say, oh, they even had artists painting murals on the walls of post offices. So? But we can't sit around. I mean, when someone came along to Jesus and wanted to get healed, he didn't say, well, now, let's see where we might be able to fit you in a week from Tuesday or something like that. He took some dust, spat in it, made a paste, and smeared it in the eyes of the man and said, ankle off down to the Siloam pool and wash your eyes, and you're going to be okay. And he was. To me, it's hard to kind of sort out when you get to your early 80s, you're not really ready to go charging around the country and whatnot. But you have to say to yourself, when you see a problem coming up to your door or gently rapping on the door, go open it and see what you can do about it. Well, I think the main thing that really appealed to me, that I knew some people, I knew some guys, as a matter of fact, I met in business. I didn't realize it at the time what the little opening was going to be. It was a German guy, brilliant fella. He had been when I knew him, he was a graduate of Harvard and a doctorate and working in Bayer, and then his sidekick was a man who was in another chemical company based in Germany. And I said, and he was, a Hitler youth group type and whatnot, and I said, it must have been pretty tough at the end of World War II. He said it was pretty bad. He said, if it hadn't been for the Quakers, I would have starved. I said, well, how do you mean? Well, he said, in the area that I was living, he said, there are a bunch of Quakers there. Now, these are Phil's words, not necessarily his words. And he said they had a soup kitchen, and we were welcome to go there and have lunch. They served a big meal every day. And I knew that if I could go there and get full, he would have had to eat 1,500 calories of soup and bread. But he said, with what I could scavenge around, I could make it, and it wouldn't have been for the Quakers, I may not have survived. So I started reading more about how the Quakers ended up there. Now, it was the British Society of Friends and the Americans that did it. But, they helped clean up the remains of the bombing mess there. They helped on the feeding and so on. They weren't the only ones. But I think that was a sense of unity, and as I said, I've just known some of them in Australia and Canberra and in Sydney and of course in Hobart, and I think they've got it. They've got some pretty good ideas. The fact that I think there's a lethargy on it, I think that there's more talk about practice and faith and not enough about getting up off their bums and doing something constructive about to relieve, the poor, the homeless, and so on. But that's just my personal view. You ask, yes. Why do I not have the same enthusiasm at the for the meeting here? It's a talk meeting. Well, first of all, I'd have to say I have an immense sense of gratitude that all of you are taking the time to do this and the wherewithal to do it. I think it's something that can be very worthwhile. And because I said what I like to think about problems, I like to know where I am and how did I get here. And I think this is one of the things you're going to find out as you go around and do these interviews. Where are we and how did we get here? Because I don't think we're at a very good spot. I'd like to sort of get some religious society of friends Quakerized geritol and started feeding into the water supply. I think that we better get off our bums and get busy on some of these things. Not just Friends. I'm talking about other religions too. I mean, I touched on this earlier. You know, what is Christ going to say? Did you know what was going on? Well, yeah, I did. Well, why didn't you do something? Well, Lord, I had to meet with my CPA and look at my tax return, and I may have to do a refile in 2009. So, beside the point, son, you should have done something about it right then. And it's not just Quakers who I think are missing the point. I think it's happening in a lot of other areas. And I think that we have to sort of pause and reflect and get accurately say to ourselves and analyze, where are we? What are the things that got us here? Some things are good, other parts are a bit of a mess. I'm thrilled to see that we're going to get some form of medical coverage, universal medical coverage. Now, I sense that there's a bunch of guys running around loose that in the Congress and whatnot that are going to try to stop that. I think we're going to prevail on it. But I think that, there is an awareness that we have to do something. There's no excuse for not doing something. Now, we can't go out and tilt at every windmill, but we better have the courage and the common sense nous to sit down and identify what things can I do and what things can I not do. Too much of our youth today is sitting there, or hunched over a computer and whatnot, and I feel like saying, get up off your bloody bum and go take a walk around and look what God created out there, and come back and give thanks to Him, and then start reading a little bit of a history of understanding what do you think you were called in the world to do. It wasn't to sit there, texting to some bloke discussing, what's going on at some pub or other. I'll meet you at 8 o'clock at the university pub. We need to sort of pause and reflect as a people. We think we've been a blessed people in this country. The last time I checked, I'm just one of those poor immigrants that came in. But, you guys were here. But I think we have to say to ourselves, what does He want us to do? Now, we said He doesn't want us to do anything, or maybe he wants us to get a new set of golf clubs, or He wants us to take a trip to Bermuda. I don't think that's what He's going to tell us to do. Is it the purpose of life to be able to, have a seat at all of the Steelers games at $85 a pop, and watch a bunch of boofheads running around trying to bang each other around like on a modified form of rugby? I mean, I find that, but what is unique about this country? Well, I think that one of the things to me that I still feel very strongly, what a wonderful, beautiful experiment it was. When I read something about how this country was founded, those guys had guts. Those guys had guts. I mean, when you're putting your John Henry on that piece of paper, and as some wag said, well, you better hang together or we'll all hang separately. For someone who lived in what had been an English convict colony, and here were these bunch of fellas from these New England states and some of the Middle Atlantic states who were willing to say to the king, get lost, dude. We're through with you. Pretty courageous stuff. And they say, but where's that fiber gone? Where's it gone? I mean, you look at this and at the situation today, and you say, is corporate governance, is it being run right? Is it on track? No, it's not. The boards of directors today are largely, not all, but largely, they're the kept men and women of the CEO. There are some countries in this world today that still have a rule, corporate rule under their securities laws, that the chairman must be an independent person. France has that. Germany has that. England has that. The CEO will be the managing director or president or whatever it happens to be. We used to do the same thing in this country. When you look at the amount of money that is being tied up in people's 401ks, pension plans, and so on, that today, and particularly it's getting compounded by companies shedding their pension plans and forcing the people into a 401k. You know, some of my daughters are in that situation. They don't know from Adam's off ox about how to run money funds. Their business is law. Their business is nursing and whatnot. They don't have time to sit around reading Barron's magazine or something like that. So the laxity that has come through this laissez-faire attitude of the name Bush is a stench in my nostrils. They know better. They should know better. They were born to wealth and privilege. And for them to have let happen under the SEC and some of these other rules that came into corporate governance, to let them sink as low as they were, it is just a damned disgrace. And for what they've done in some of the ways in which we have generated almost like a Nazi-like image in this country of these, prisons and whatnot we've had around Abu Ghraib and so on and so forth. Is that what America really stands for? Abu Ghraib? No, I don't think so. But where's the healthy sense of outrage? Now, when you get into the business, the auditors started to get lax. Look at Enron. The auditors used to have a rule that we cannot both be the auditor and advise them on their management affairs, because if we do, one will get whored by the other. And that's WHORED. We put slash and gored, too, in it. We have to go back and look at some of the fundamental structuring of how was business structured so there was an accountability. It's not our funds managing. It's other people's funds. We have been trusted. And that's what I'm trying to say in that book, is that there are principles there that have to be followed. The responsibilities to the market, to management itself, to the employees, to our suppliers, and to the communities at large. I used to call it the responsibilities of the 5 M's: markets, management, money, communities, and so on. But we have to, at some point in time, pause and reflect. Are we willing to admit we're on the wrong track? And I'm not sure we will. Now, usually we get to admit we are on a wrong track when the whole bloody thing comes to a mess somewhere. And I shudder, because who's going to get hurt in that? It won't be the CEO of Pittsburgh National Bank making $10 million a year. Look, I'm not poor. I'm not rich. I don't know. I wouldn't want $10 million a year. I wouldn't want it. Now, maybe they've figured out some ways to take it with them when they do the crossover. And all I can say, as the Germans say, guten Lacken. I don't think it'll happen. But I think we do have to take a pause and say, if there's one thing that I'm responsible for of running Company A, it has to be run. So if the widow has her dough in it, she's not going to get sunk. That fiduciary responsibility is still a valid accountability standard to live by. I don't know how many trips I made to England and sat down with Ben Roundtree and the group that I identify in the front and talking it out. And finally I had to say, Ben, look, the culture and the way you do things in England is different from the culture and the way things are done in the United States. With your permission and acknowledgement, I would like to do it for the United States, honoring to what you did, and it's by your permission, but set it out according to the principles that I know have worked. Now, is it any, holy writ? No. But I'd say it's not a bad triptych for how to run a company in an ethical, decent way in this country at this time. And I think those are pretty timeless. Are they all Philip Smith's ideas? No. Some of them are. Some of them are just the refinements that